Everybody, lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We hope this afternoon is going to be helpful for you. We just want to share with you some excerpts from research and things that we've read over the last 12, 18 months. But we also want to make sure it's interactive. Thank you those people who've been on the MEC, the Microsoft Educator Centre, and set up a profile and used the code that you can see there. It does go towards your CPD, and we can absolutely say it is worth going on the MEC because there's lots of free training there, which is great. Just as an introduction to ourselves, you can probably tell us from that I'm the one with very, very little hair. My name's Tim. Henry is our digital leader, and then we've got 3 other colleagues who also help sometimes with training on these different live events, and we've got a series of them coming up during this year. So today we are talking about educational technology, EdTech. And I'd like to start off with a question. Just like you to have a read of the slide there, and then could you put in the chat a way that you think the world has changed in the last 5 to 10 years? So let's use that feature to actually have that conversation.
As I have the benefit of a mic, I think one of the things for me that has changed in the last few years is the fact that people expect things right away. We have things like Amazon Prime and things like that we are able to get things whenever we want, and I think that transfers to lots of different elements of our comes into teaching and learning and other elements. You're just on mute, Mr. Clark.
I'm so busy trying to sort everyone else out. I have changed it so everyone, if they want to, can come off mic. And if you want to see each other, you are very welcome to have your cameras on. So I see William's typing, but sometimes it's easier to talk. So William said, was thinking similar to Henry with social media, that instant news. Absolutely. There's none of this waiting around. You're probably all far too young. I can remember in the 80s sitting there with an Amstrad or something like that and putting a cassette in and waiting for 25 minutes for it to load up before playing a single game. And then Emily's mentioned about getting information quicker. Absolutely. It is that speed, it's that access, isn't it? You know, for all of us. Is there anybody else who'd like to add to the chat or to unmute and say something? Because
and I think something with that information quicker, how reliable sometimes is that information quicker? Definitely, Richard, less face-to-face communication. I think COVID has certainly, unfortunately, put even more factor of that. But I think we, as a society, even actually children that are growing up have less face-to-face communication. Even my 2 younger siblings, I know that they would far rather a conversation via text rather than a conversation via the phone or in person.
So actually having a choice of ways means that people can choose something where they feel more comfortable, which, you know, is helpful to have that. So the follow-up question then, in terms of, if that's how the world has changed, how has education changed? And I've said the last 5 to 10 years. You might want to think about the last 2 years, because quite frankly, there's been a lot of change. So again, in terms of EdTech, what has changed for education, the way we do our jobs, the way the children learn in the last 2 years or the last 5 to 10 years? Again, please feel free to use the chat, but also please feel free to come off mute if you'd like to share. Okay, so Richard has shared about weekly homework set and completed electronically. Lockdown home learning skills develop hugely too, of course. And I wonder, Richard, if you'd be willing to just share, so in terms of that weekly homework set and completed, what are the benefits of that, and have there been any issues for you in your school?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Good stuff. So I guess the benefits are the amount of, the ease of it, the kind of quickness of the links and so on, and how you can track what homework has been done or not throughout the week and at the end of the week. I guess the obvious things that spring to mind are the lack of equipment at home or access to Wi-Fi, that kind of things, or if things go wrong with their laptop that week, or if parents are kind of opposed to further screen time because they're all gaming and whatnot. So yeah, various problems, but also definitely benefits, and I think there's a wider range of activities they can do at home, and of course that was all developed a lot, wasn't it, during lockdown.
Brilliant, thank you very much for sharing. And Emily, you put a wider variety of information sources. Any chance you could expand on that a bit for us? Okay.
Testing your typing skills to type quickly.
Okay. In which case, please don't worry, Emily, we won't ask you to type the whole thing out. But I would say, I mean, going back to what Henry was saying, actually the fact that, yes, there is more information out there, you can get it quicker, but some of which may be questionable, but actually by having that wider variety, actually teaching the children to be critical thinkers and critical readers and to check whether the information is valid and accurate, I think is great bonus of having that variety. Okay. So what we're going to do then is move on, and we're going to, as I said, share some of the key things that have come out in the last sort of couple of years. So I think handing over to you, Mr. P.
Thank you very much indeed. So this is some research that has been conducted by Microsoft as part of a research thing that they did. There's two things. One was Education Reimagined, and the other was the Education Transformation Framework. And Education Reimagined combines the best in school, but also remote learning with digital engagement. It is more than a quick fix, and I think that's something that I know that lots of schools have been thinking about recently with the COVID crisis. Actually, how can we harness that digital platform that we have maybe purchased, maybe used as part of COVID, and continue that as part of our learning this year and continuing on. It's a way to accelerate learning by providing student-centered approaches to meet diverse learner needs. Learners will not learn when they are uncomfortable or contribute when they are self-conscious. As we know, emotion can be a gatekeeper with that. And it's all about a hybrid model, so must embrace digital to amplify, accelerate, connect to learners and learning while intentionally focusing on global competencies as well as academic standards. And I think that's one thing, touching on the point before, it's actually, we've had that opportunity to engage that technology. It's about using that to embrace and actually these are all skills that children are going to be using the majority of their lives for jobs that we don't know that they're going to be what they're going to do. And then the Education Transformation Framework is an inspiring and motivating experience, are essential element of teaching and learning. Education and leader development, personalised learning and well-being, curriculum and assessment, an immersive experience, nurtures a growth mindset and gives pupils skills for them to thrive. It talks about in the modern teaching and learning the element of the importance and professional development, and there's a huge variety of ways of professional development now. Participating in active communities, sharing ideas, developing innovation, creativity, and 21st century learning through 21st century learning skills also. And I think, you know, that element of modern teaching and learning, there's lots of different ways in which children can learn nowadays. There's VR that they can experience going round an Egyptian pyramid. It could be that they could build it. Whether I know that at school this afternoon we had some Lego people coming in, and that's just another way of that teaching and learning that can support and help their understanding also. But also it's being at that cutting edge. Sometimes education can be left behind, and education can sometimes be that 5 years behind what everyone else in the business world is doing, and it's about being on top of that. And there's lots of tools out there at the moment that are currently being developed and being implemented to support that teaching and learning.
Thank you very much, Henry. One of the other things that has come out in the last couple of years is this report from the World Economic Forum. So it is looking at it globally. And although it's possibly more focused on secondary and looking at going into the workplace, I still think there's lots of value in looking at it from a primary perspective, because we want to be developing these skills with the children from an early age. So the Economic Forum talked about children becoming both productive contributors, but also responsible and active citizens. So to do that, they think there are 4 key skill sets that children need to be equipped with. They need to be equipped with this global citizenship, which actually trying to do that without technology would prove very difficult. There's the element of innovation and creativity. Then there's technology skills themselves, but then also really importantly the interpersonal skills. And, you know, reflecting back on what Henry was saying about siblings, actually there are people who find it easier to connect online or to connect through email, as well as other people who prefer to connect face to face. So actually developing all those skills for the children is really important, and they can be broadly incorporated into the learning experiences and the environments that we have here at school. And so they also talk about the aim is to foster this kind of thinking, that what education systems will need to do is shift away from a process-based approach to a problem-based approach to learning. So actually the children have a greater sense of ownership, and it also creates that great sense of community in the classroom. So there's more learning together, and making this shift will require us all to take that open-ended rather than a single answer approach. So the idea is that classrooms will enable children to try out different solutions, compare results with different groups, to iterate through that process, build on others' ideas, and focus on that process to solving a problem rather than trying to just get to one answer. It also will need them to be more collaborative, to expand on and improve each other's ideas, not just agree or disagree. And an interesting challenge here, I think, potentially for not necessarily us in schools, but perhaps education departments around the world, is saying, you know, while traditional education systems have been designed to decrease learning with age, so as we get into adulthood and then, you know, further on in the career, often in the past it was, well, I've learned everything now and I'll just carry on doing it. Actually, what we need now is this new system, this new approach and mindset where people actively engage in lifelong learning, because again, you know, what have we experienced in the last 18 months? We've absolutely had to rethink the way that we do our jobs in schools. And so to realise this vision, it's actually about developing that real love of learning with children from a very young age, activating that inquiry-based, that open-ended methods of teaching. So, you know, if you've ever walked into an early years classroom, you will know that's exactly the type of thing that we can be doing with children from a young age to support that lifelong learning. And that will help children create solutions. It will help them learn to iterate, to improve those solutions based on observations and conversations, and to drive their learning forward for the sake of improving it, rather than just to get to a right answer. Now, another book that we've read recently, you may have, and if you're on Twitter, you've probably heard and follow someone called Al Kingsley, and he produced last year his My Secret EdTech Diary. And I'll just pause for a minute and give you a second or two to read the quote that you can see on your screen. Now, Al's book was very much written sort of towards the end of the first lockdown and into the second lockdown. So it was quite a lot of it was focused on remote learning. And again, I think similar to as we discussed earlier, I think William said, actually, sometimes it works well for some families, it works for some, it doesn't. But I think a key point that's made in that quote is that technology has a role to play when appropriate. And again, I think, you know, a key thing that as people who are passionate about EdTech and encouraging people to use it is one of the things that Henry and I would always say, and a lot of the research shows, is it's not about using it all the time. It's not just using it for the sake of it. It's actually when it's purposeful. So some of the other key messages that Al Kingsley puts in his book, he talks about trying not to force new technology into old ways of working, because he says actually that's counterproductive. So and it's not realizing the full potential of the technology that we've got now to extend and enhance learning and engage and empower learners. And certainly, speaking as someone who's been in this job for over 25 years now, the tech that I was using as an NQT was vastly different. I think an overhead projector and a bit of acetate was pretty much what I had. So again, it's about saying if we've got this new tech, actually, what are the new things we can do with it? We don't just want to replicate what we've done. He also talks about the online genie being out the bottle. And while there are, and there may well be people that you know work in your school who have been saying perhaps in the last sort of 6-12 months, oh, I can't wait for this all to be over so we can just put all that away and I never have to do a Teams call or a Zoom call again, and we can get back to doing things as we've done. But actually, I think given how much we have learned, given how much the children have experienced and how much progress we've been made, actually, that future is there. It's right with us now. And actually, there's opportunities, you know, through blended learning, through hybrid learning, through the different apps and the different systems and platforms that we've become accustomed to using, that the children are adept at using, that we want to keep taking advantage of. He also, another challenge here for education departments, says we also need to take the archaic assessment system of high stakes, end of test written exams and recognise actually the world has changed. That's not part of the modern world of work. And actually, if assessment systems are going to remain reliable, valid, and actually, most importantly, relevant, we've got an awful lot of catching up to do. Right. Going to hand back to Henry now.
So when we started to almost align our journey a bit more, about 18 months ago, once reading some research from Microsoft, we came up with our own digital vision at Cornerstone. And this is one of the elements of it, part of the teaching and learning. And in particular, there's a Wordle on the screen that picks out the key words that we thought were important as part of the teaching and learning, that it actually inspires the children. An important thing is that they collaborate together. Obviously, there's an element of discovery, that it provides curiosity also. And I think they're really important elements, whether it's as part of the digital is helping them to understand more and they're learning more about it, or whether they are learning something. Maybe it's something to do with teams that are learning about, or something to do with their online platform that they're using. So these are really important to support them, and these skills we thought as part of the teaching and learning element of our digital vision are really important skills that they will need when they move on to secondary school, but also moving on further afield, further when they get jobs. And we also use these digital skills to link up to our learning powers at the school. So we have communication, teamwork, resilience, independence, and positivity. And each of these we link as part of our digital skills because we think they are just as important elements as part of their own learning, as well as transferring to using digital platforms.
So one of the other elements we've seen through the research is looking at these possibilities of transformation. So you can see 6 pictures there, obviously all with very smiley, happy learners and lots of sunshine and lots of space, which is, you know, great when that happens. What we'd like you to do is, if you just have a look at those pictures and the captions, maybe just pick one, and could you have a think about actually what ideas have you got, or what questions you've got about that one? Is there something that you and your school have done in the last 12 months or 24 months that you hadn't done previously, linked to one of those 6? So again, we'll have a look at the chat. If you want to unmute, and you can unmute, and want to let us know verbally, that's absolutely fine as well. Henry, while people are busy typing, would you like to maybe suggest one thing that for you has been a transformation or a change for us in the last 12, 24 months? And you're muted this time.
I think for me, the actual thinking about that, teachers embracing a growth mindset, I think that's had to be definitely adopted and continue to be adopted because of the way we've driven things at Cornerstone. That actually sometimes things don't work. It could be the device that they are using, but I think staff have become much more resilient to that and find ways in which are around it to support the teaching and learning. And I think also that education unlimited by time or place. You know, the factor of Richard talking about doing home learning online, it's almost unlimited, that you can see that learning journey through that whole time. I can see and mark my home learning and my pupils, and it, yeah, you know, because of that, I see a constant journey.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got Richard talking about differentiation can be achieved more effectively online, lower ability groups accessing online lessons within the classroom. So absolutely, things can be more accessible, things can be more inclusive. That idea of personalised learning, rather than seeing it as it's for every individual child, it's actually personalising to groups and needs. And again, Richard, I don't know if you're able to come off mute and if you want to just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's more with maths in mind, just thinking of a couple of the children in my class who have, you know, a 20-minute lesson perhaps on Open Academy or ETM that they can just sit and access, and it's the same strand of maths, but it's certainly a very different level, but they don't have to kind of sit through a section of the lesson that just they can't access, whereas in the past perhaps they might have done before going off into a different task. So it just means that they're engaged and they're, you know, it's very personalised, I guess, tailored to where they're at with ability.
Yeah.
So more effective perhaps than how I would have done it historically.
Yeah, and again, therefore, something we don't want to go backwards, do we? Because if it's working better, I mean, we did a similar thing. So last year we were producing on-demand learning videos, short videos each week with key bits of the English and maths to try and help the children plug those gaps. And there were particular families that we said, look, this is for them, something where they've got a big gap there, they're really not sure. Please, could you rewatch it with them 3 or 4 times? And again, they were, you know, they were short, as videos. They could be watched on any device. But again, we're reusing them again this year. So in some of our home learning, and we do for whole of Key Stage 2, we use Teams and OneNote. We're putting in those on-demand learning videos and saying, actually, rewatch this again before you do your home learning. So thank you for that. And Emily, you've put, we've been contributing to a class blog, and when the unit of work ended, the class decided they wanted to run all year. It was lovely that they've been inspired. We suggested they blog from home on our class blog, so any place, any time, absolutely, that Education Unlimited, brilliant. And for those who don't have access, we're going to provide the opportunity in Golden Time. So again, I think it is about saying, you know, there are barriers, there are problems, but there's also solutions there. And actually, for those children who can't manage things at home, actually, how can we, as you say, give them the same opportunities, but in a slightly different way in school? Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. I mean, I think I would probably have said my example would also be that Education Unlimited by time or place. So just recently, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of Year 4s who are in our Global Neighbours team and we were going to be presenting to the whole school about new projects for this year. And although we had a face-to-face meeting, we're in a channel in a team. And so therefore we were sharing some of the PowerPoint, we were asking questions, we were working with each other and having those conversations whilst at home in preparation for that. So again, it was that blend of discussions in school, but also practicing at home and being able to access stuff, which was great. Okay, thank you very much to those people who've shared. What we're now going to do is move on to, and this does come from Microsoft's. They've done a lot of research with a lot of different partners, and this is about their 21st century learning skills. So on the Microsoft Educator Centre, there is actually a learning pathway about this, and I would really recommend it. It's really valuable, really reflective in thinking about, well, actually, what are the learning experiences that I'm giving to my class or to our children in our school, and how can we help develop those 21st century learning skills? So we're going to go through 6 of them. We're going to sort of start top left and read left to right. So the first one is about collaboration, which is the 3 people. And they talk about, we live in this globally connected world, but actually, do we effectively collaborate? So yes, the children might talk with each other online, but actually, are they collaborating? Are they building a shared understanding? Are they making their voices heard to affect real positive change in the world? And they talk about real world problems, you know, are unlikely to be solved by individuals. So even Elon Musk, with all the money he's got, it's unlikely that he on his own is going to be able to solve the problems. It's going to be groups. It's going to be through collaboration. And they talk about what are those component skills? How do we want to develop those with the children to collaborate effectively? So negotiation, conflict resolution, making agreements on action planning, what's going to be done, distributing tasks, listening to others. I mean, how big a thing is that to develop with the children? And then it's also about that idea of developing a learning culture that supports teachers to design those learning activities where students' work is interdependent. They actually rely on that collaboration. So they're also sharing responsibility and they're making substantive decisions with each other.
The next one talks about communication, and obviously the internet and the invention of the mobile phones has revolutionised how people of all ages communicate and can communicate. The factor of the use of Xboxes, PlayStations, which young to even younger children getting devices that they can communicate through games. They talk about with the cloud technology and smartphones, people can access the internet in a multiple different ways, and have the answers at their hands. That conversation that we're having at the beginning, that actually information is really quick to come by. Even actually a factor of today, when I was looking through a reading diary that a child of mine handed in, I didn't recognise the book. I was instantly able just to Google it and see the picture of the book and see what the book was about. These technologies obviously have a huge potential to support skill communication, but then they also place demands on the teacher about how to prepare them to use those technologies appropriately and in a sensible fashion. I know that I'm sure fully well that you have e-safety conversations with your children that you teach within your schools, and actually highlight the importance of how they communicate online. It also is the fact that it provides those deeper conversations, whether it's across Atlantic with schools across the world, and it also gives them opportunity to share their views and learn outside of their walls of the classroom, so they can understand what it's like in different schools.
The third one along is knowledge construction. And again, one of the things that we liked about the 21st century learning skills is even without the technology, we felt that these are things that actually are relevant to teaching and learning and the way we want to use pedagogy anyway. So one of the things it talks about is we need to keep asking ourselves, is knowledge static or is it dynamic and constantly evolving? Again, I think the last 18 months have probably proved that. And so actually what we need to do and help the children do is to make effective use of this vast volume of information, to actually construct knowledge. So we need them engaging deeply with that knowledge and using and choosing from an ever-growing range of digital tools. We should be requiring learners to use information to actually construct their own understanding and then engage in that purposeful meaning making. So it's not just I've remembered this, actually I understand it, and through that, this is how I make sense of it. So we want them to interpret, we want them to analyse, we want them to synthesise, evaluate information. And the idea is that once students grasp concepts and ideas, in order to deepen their understandings, they need to apply that in a new context. And again, we talk about this a lot, whether it's reading, writing, maths, history. It's about saying, so we've got this now, how can you show that understanding? So it's also about being able to make connections across and between big ideas. So although the national curriculum here in the UK is very much focused on actual single subjects, we know that as learners and in life, it's actually about those connections. And they talk about by engaging in such learning, students will be better prepared to construct knowledge individually and in collaboration with their peers in order to make meaning, both now and in the future. Over to you, Henry.
Thank you. So the next one talks about self-regulation, and the main things that it focuses on is thinking about the learning goals, and also the factor of adapting. The 21st century learning environments need to be prominently inquiry-based. Where learners are actively involved in the learning process and more proactive and take an interest in their own learning. So actually that element of what it is over the long term, and bringing about how do they have the opportunity to plan their work? Do they have the opportunity to revise the work based on feedback they have given? Do they have the opportunity also to bring in learning goals and associated success criteria that they can assess how successful they have been at their learning that they have done? And during planning their work, are they thinking about what are the steps that they need to go through to achieve their learning goal? Deciding how they need to break down their task also, and creating possibly a schedule that they need to follow that they need the dates that they need to complete certain things by. And it's an opportunity about thinking about what they're going to breaking down that task to achieve that end goal, which sometimes can be delivered as a class or can be worked in as groups. And by doing that, it gives the opportunity for the children to take control of their actions, and actually they become more engrossed in the learning project that you set for them. We all know that actually something that they have taken ownership of, or something that they are passionate in, they are more than likely to want to do it even more and come back. Whereas something that they haven't, it's very much more, you have to engage them a lot more with it. which then brings in lots of the elements, because obviously if they're working as a team, that communication is so key, and it's such a vital skill, which sometimes they need work on as part of it.
Okay, the fifth one is about real world problem solving, which we have mentioned from some of the previous research, and it's the middle one on the bottom row. And it, you know, recognises that actually the world that the children are growing up in faces more complex and challenging problems than ever before. I mean, the fact that we've got the climate conference going on in Glasgow this week or next week, not sure exactly when, but you know, and how close we are getting to the point where actually we won't be able to return. Actually, you know, the children's generations are the ones that are going to have to solve some of these. So society requires problem solvers who are going to tackle these hard problems, but in creative and innovative ways, not just repeating what we've done previously. So they need to be adept at generating and testing ideas to solve complex problems. They need to be prepared to ask those questions, to work with others, and to try and find those solutions. And through that innovation, it requires them putting their ideas and solutions to practice in the real world. So it is about trying to give the children authentic learning experiences, not just I'm doing this for my teacher, but actually here's a real problem. What are we really going to do about it, and how can that improve? So again, our global neighbours, for example, here at Cornerstone, we do Harvest, and we were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago saying the children in the global neighbours team were saying, but Mr. Clark, children and families don't just get hungry once a year when we do Harvest. Actually, this is a regular thing. And so, okay, so what can we do about it? And so the idea of having a Friday food bank has come up, and they say, actually, if we can provide a little bit each week and spread it out over the year, that's a way that we can make a difference to a real world problem. I'll hand over to Henry for the last skill.
Lovely. The last skill is ICT for learning. So we obviously live in a connected world with almost unlimited access to a vast array of digital information and experiences. If you think as part of your day, how much digital technology you come across maybe a weekend or something. I was just thinking, you know, the factor of online shopping. You've got the element of whether it's producing things for posting items, whether it's using UPS or DPD or things. So it continues to transform the way we live and work. We connect with, build relationships with a wider number of people because of that technology. And it enables us to understand the world in a deeper way and with a multitude of perspectives. We need to ensure the learners understand and use these technologies in powerful ways and learn and make sense of the world they live in. We need to do this as design learning experience so that young people have the skills not only to evaluate and analyse, but also design and create new information for a wide range of digital technologies. What we as educators need to think about is how we design those learning experiences and how learners use ICT to combat those problems. You know, I think it's not shying away from things that could be challenging, because actually that builds up that resilience, builds up that perseverance that those children will learn to show and understand. So it's bringing in lots of those elements, and each one of these 21st learning century can be transferred to day-to-day tasks, but are just so important to achieving 21st century learning. You're on mute again, Mr. Clark.
It's back to 2-1. You're winning again. Brings us sort of to the end of that discussion, and hopefully a useful summary of some key bits of research. We could have gone on for hours, but we tried to just capture a few snippets that we thought would be valuable to share. And the next sort of question to think about is, well, actually, what could learning look like using these tools? So on the screen there, you've got Teams, you've got OneNote, Forms, Immersive Reader, Sway, Flipgrid, PowerPoint, Paint 3D and Wakelet. And the reason we put those there are those are ones that we're going to be sharing how we use them here at Cornerstone over our series of primary edu events over the course of this school year. But again, be great to have that interaction. So if anybody thinks, oh yeah, we've used this brilliantly in the last 12 months, that's a new way we've used it, it'd be great if you can either unmute and tell us or pop it in the chat. What could learning what has learning looked like for you and your learners in your school using perhaps one of these tools? Give you a couple of minutes just to type or to unmute if you would like to.
I think one thing for me is the fact of use of forms across the whole school. We started to send permissions out through forms for school trips, whether it's finding out through parent surveys and things like that. And it's made everything more accessible for parents, but also it's made it a lot easier, and a lot less paper has been printed out. I don't hand half as many letters as I used to at the end of the day. They can be collated, and really easily lots of people can access them and access the data that is needed to be accessed. So I'd say forms has been quite a transformational change in our school, one of the things.
And I'd add to that, Henry, it's also saved a lot of time. So the office, for example, sending out the permission slips at the beginning of the year, used to be that they get all the slips in and then spend about a week typing it into Excel, whereas now Forms does it for us. I'd also say Sway has been brilliant for us as a staff, because so we do a school newsletter each half term, and previously people would email me stuff and then I'd put it into a Word document and then we'd send it out and we'd print it out. But because we now have a Sway, everyone can access it on any device. People are adding bits to it. People are saying, can I add a section on this? Can I add a section on that? So it's actually giving staff more voice. Again, it's cutting down on workload, so but brilliantly collaborative. And again, making it far more interesting for the children and the families to look at the newsletter, because there's photos and there's links and there's video clips. So it's more interactive and more interesting. I can see William is still typing furiously, so thank you, William, for adding some ideas. You've put, we've trialled using Word via Teams to complete an activity, and noticed giving feedback was quicker and easier for the children to respond to. So again, if you're able to unmute and just explain that in a bit more detail, William, that would be great.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Good. Yeah, so we just did it was part of a computing module, but it was with a view to using it for homework and other things. So we got them to complete kind of an assignment, maybe that's not the right word, but through Teams, and then as teachers kind of marked it and gave feedback through Teams or Word on Teams, and just found it was much quicker than marking books would have been.
Yeah.
But B, it was just easier because the children were able to respond to it using the tool that's on the software. It just worked better for everyone.
So actually, from a learning process, actually it was smoother, it was quicker, and actually the children made more progress through it, which is great. And have you looked at using Immersive Reader at all through Word on Teams?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a lot of first stage learners, so EAL pupils.
Yeah.
Significant language needs. It's kind of something that we're looking at, but we didn't kind of use it, I think, just because it was that's kind of a new piece of software for us at the school. So it was kind of, let's keep that in mind, but look at it next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there is a tendency, and as a head teacher, Henry will, I'm sure, tell you that this is true, that sometimes head teachers want to go 100 miles per hour when you need to go at 20, 30, make sure things are really clear and embedded and people understand it. So yeah, I mean, we started to look at Immersive Reader last year, but we're still working on that as well. So thank you for sharing. And Richard, you've talked about using Sway for all foundation subjects for evidence of weekly learning. So photos, videos, short explanation, accessible to subject leaders to have access to learning so far each term. Sounds great. So they're being shared with subject leaders. Are they being shared out with families and with other classes as well?
Not with families. Part of the reason being that we can then put all of our children, videos and photos on there without having to worry about the non-photo children. There's quite a few within the school, so it's kind of kept within the school. But because we work with a there's another school within our academy that we kind of work closely with, as opposed to having to need to go and do, you know, book looks or observations. You can just literally follow the Sway link. It's all kind of there. It's a good way of monitoring that the learning is taking place each week for things like, you know, computing or the subjects that perhaps in the past have kind of been pushed aside, sadly. But it's also, you know, accessing things like the vocabulary that's being used, the technical vocabulary that if the teachers in there very short, it's good. It doesn't take time to put the entries on each week, but they can put, say we used debugging or algorithm or whatever it might be today. But same for things like arts, that doesn't always necessarily have evidence of the learning or evidence of progression perhaps, or music, unless it's videoed or recorded, it can kind of disappear into the school. So it's just a great way of accessing that. I think also Sway just looks good. So we had Ofsted come in and say, well, show me what you're doing here, format, music. It's brilliant, you know, you've got a collection of short videos and to show progression and what's going on. I think it would naturally just be impressive.
Absolutely. Just sit and inspect in a room and say, well, sit there for 3 hours and watch these through, and then you don't need to come and have a look. That sounds brilliant. Thank you. And then we've got Kulthum Alez said Sway, you've been using that. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about how you've been using it? Maybe not able to mute. So Zainab Alez, you've talked about forms and PowerPoint. Are you able to unmute and tell us a bit more detail?
I don't speak English very good, but I work for Forum and PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And network, Wikilead. But
okay, well, thank you for sharing the comment in there. That's really helpful, and we're hoping that this is proving helpful for you as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to bring it to a close. So really a big thank you to you all for finding the time to join us. You will have received emails with both of our email addresses in there. So if there's anything that you've heard today, you think, actually, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, or, well, how do you do that there? Or if you've got something you think, well, I don't think Tim and Henry do that, and we do this and it's brilliant, I want to let them know about it. We'd love to hear about it as well. So our email addresses are there. We're also both on Twitter, so our Twitter handles are there. And hopefully you will also have seen that there's a range of different primary-based and primary-focused EdTech events coming up over this year that we're running. And hopefully some of those will also be interesting and useful for you. So thank you very much for joining us. We wish you all the very best for the rest of 2021. Hope you manage to stay safe and that you have a great time in your schools with your children, and hopefully look forward to seeing you at a future event. Many thanks.
Thank you very much all.